Hello and welcome to another BlenderWiz video tutorial. Today we are going to create an abstract animation using an icosphere partnered with freestyle, particle system, and a displacement node. Overall, this will be fairly simple, so let's get started. Open up a new scene in Blender. Let's go ahead and replace the cube with an icosphere. So hit Shift A and bring in the icosphere. And if your subdivisions isn't set to 3 already, do that now. I think by default it is set to 2, mine is set to 3 for some strange reason. Now also notice that the number of vertices is 162. This is important for when we set up the particle system. Now that we have this, let's go ahead and make our scene look decent. If we render this right now, it looks pretty bad. Head over to the world settings in the properties panel, and let's just change the horizon to a pretty bright white color, like that, and enable ambient occlusion, environmental lighting, and indirect lighting. If we set the factor down to 0.5, it'll help keep the ambient occlusion from completely taking over. Let's also set the camera to front view mode, and we can delete our default lamp. If we render this right now, it is a white sphere in a semi-white horizon. I haven't made mine completely white. I can probably bump that a little bit more. But it doesn't look that great. And this is because we don't have any material. So, with the icosphere selected, let's come over to the Materials tab. Give it a new material, and I'm just going to set it to kind of a bluish color. I don't know, something. Just get some color that you like, something like that. And then turn the specularity down to 0. If we render this now, it's kind of a blue sphere on a white background, and it's not that bad. We can actually see it this time. Now let's get into freestyle. First, come over to the render panel and enable freestyle. Next, come over to the render layers and give freestyle a line set to render to. So now what we need to do is define which edges freestyle will render on. Once we add the displacement modifier, we're really going to have no idea what the edges are going to look like. So these default edge types aren't really going to help us. Instead, with the icosphere selected, hit Tab and then hit Control E, mark freestyle edge. And that will just set all of the edges on our icosphere to being freestyle edges. Fantastic. Now what we need to do is come down here and check edge marks. Give it a quick render, and voila, all of our edges have freestyle lines drawn on them. Okay, this is great, but I wanted white lines. So what we gotta do is come down to the freestyle line set options right there. Click on color, change the color to white or really whatever color you want. If I give this a render now, I've got nice white lines on my icosphere. Perfect. So you can really make them whatever color you want. You can change pretty much any of these options. If you'd like to learn more about how you do these things, I have another tutorial that's on freestyle specifically. Check out the freestyle tutorial, obviously. So the first half of that tutorial is all about freestyle and a little what each feature does, and the second half we create blueprints for a gear using freestyle. So when we render this now, we have a nice white line on every edge of our icosphere. Let's go ahead now and set up the displacement. Head over to the Modifiers tab if you're not there already, and drop in a displacement modifier. Easy, easy, didn't do anything. What we need to do is we actually need to give it a texture to use. So come over to the Textures panel, there we go, and click on New Texture. I'm just going to name this texture, maybe spiky ball, ball displacement. There we go. And if we just look at both the texture and the materials, it looks pretty bad. We have a big pink stuff all over our blue material. Not what we want. What we can do is we can just come down here and uncheck color, and it will not have an influence on the color. And since we aren't going to be using any other influences here, we can actually just straight up uncheck our texture in the in this menu here. So head back over to the modifier here and grab our displacement. So now we have a spiky ball. Fantastic. The question now is, how do we animate this? If I drag it around, well, we can't even see the displacement when we tab into edit mode. So how do we animate this? And the answer is by using the texture coordinates. If we change it to global coordinates and then drag our ball around, it moves. And this is pretty fun. But what if you don't actually want to move the ball? What if you want it to be completely stationary along with the camera, but you still want the surface to undulate? Well, the answer is use an empty. So let's bring in an empty. I'm just going to put it behind the camera, make sure it's out of the scene, out of mind, out of sight. Good stuff. Let's name it ball control. And now if we actually change the texture coordinates from global to object, and then set the object to our ball controller, if we move our ball control object around, it will move. And then we can just set keyframes for the position of our ball control. Fairly easy and quite fun, actually. So if we can clear the position, we can rotate it, and it's a whole lot of fun. Play around with it, see what you can do. Let's go ahead and very quickly animate this. So to animate it, we need to use our little empty right here. So at position 0 along the little timeline here, just hit I to set the location, and then just drag it out to 250 or whatever you like. And then just hit G, X, and I'm just going to move it over by 1. If we hit I again, reset the position, and right now, notice how it starts out very slowly, and then speeds up, and then it slows down a little bit more again. This is because the interpolation mode is set to Bezier or BZA by default. So what we want to do, come under Key, Interpolation Mode, and set it to linear, and that will just line everything up. Just like so. So now it's going to be going at a constant speed the entire time. And that is how you animate it. Okay, fantastic. Let's go ahead now and put the little caps on each vertex, or vertex. We could model each ball onto the vertex, but that would be tedious and inefficient and a big waste of time, really. So instead, we're going to use a particle system. So come over here to the particle system and add in a new particle system slot. First thing we're going to do is change the type to hair. Now we have a big hairy ball. Not really what we want. And so first thing we want to do is put each strand on each vertex. So check advanced, and then as I was saying, remember this 162 vertices. This is where we're going to use it. First, set the emission or the position where the hair strands are emitted from to vertices, and then set the number to the number of vertices, so 162, and then uncheck random. Now there is exactly one strand per vertex. Fantastic. But it still looks like a sea anemone, or something of that sort, or a sea urchin. Not exactly what we want, and really all we have to do is we need to give it an object to render. So come down here to the render, and if we just change it to object, we'll see these kind of spots because it doesn't really know what to render. So let's head over to the second render layer and bring in another icosphere. And it doesn't need to have 3 subdivisions. So let's just turn it down to 2. And of course set the shading to smooth. Now head back over to the original render layer and set the duplicate object to that icosphere, to the second icosphere. And now it's covered in a bunch of popcorn balls. So not exactly ideal, but it's getting there. What we have to do is we just need to change the size under the physics panel here to 0.1. And there we go. We give this a quick render now. It's looking pretty good. While this is close to what we want, we can still change things around a little bit more. If we want to change the material on these tip icospheres, or these tip caps, what we can do is come over to the second render layer. Where's that? There we go. Let's reposition it toward the center. It doesn't really matter where it is, but it's easier to find when it's at the center. So just hit Shift S, and then put your cursor at the center, then selection to cursor. And now it'll be at the center. What we can do, as I was saying, what we can do to make it look better, or however we want, is just add a material to our icosphere. Technically we could make it the same material and it would blend in, or you just blend in, and I guess that's kind of cool, but I don't want to do that. So let's use that material again. And I can just turn down the specularity, and we can just mess with the color, and that's kind of fun. But I'm just going to go with a normal old white, just like that, because that is what I did for my final render. Probably gray, I don't know. The default is pretty much all it was. So you can just play with that, get whatever color you want. I do recommend making it the same color as the line, but it's art. Just have fun with it. Do whatever you want. And yeah, one more thing we can do before we can wrap it up and give it our final render. We can play with it in the compositor. So let's just check Use Nodes. Holding down Control and Shift, we can bring in a viewport, and turning on Backdrop, we're going to have to re-render that. There we go. What we can do is we can give it a few nifty little effects to spice it up a bit more. We're going to give the image some dispersion, some macro-like effects, or some lens effects, and a vignette. And of course, mess with the colors ever so slightly. So let's head back over and select the camera. And then under the camera tab here, check limits. Come into top view mode, orthographic, and just drag this distance in the depth of field out so that it's just above the surface of our icosphere. Fantastic. Okay, and what this does is when we go and render this, which we will do again, it will let us use the a special feature, the Z buffer, in our defocus node. So let's go ahead and bring one in now. Defocus. That will be under filters and right there. So we can just connect those up like so, and it's really not fun to look at right now. So to fix that, just check Use Z buffer, and well, it's perfectly clear. Not what we want. And that's because the f-stop is too high. If we turn this down to, I don't know, 2.8, we start getting kind of a macro effect. Just like that. Now, if we zoom in closer, you'll notice it's not very clean. And that's because it's set to preview. Preview makes it much faster, but not as clean. So, for just messing around, I do recommend leaving the preview checked, but for your final, obviously uncheck preview. Now this is really blurry, so I'm actually going to turn it up to about 15 because the dispersion will help bring it out a bit more. So speaking of dispersion, let's bring in a dispersion node. So this is going to be lens distortion, and that too should be under filter, right? Well, distort. It's under distort. Lens distortion right there. And then you can just turn up the dispersion as high as you like. You'll start getting some fun rainbow colors all over the place, and it'll make your eyes go a little wonky, but it's kind of abstract, so you can do whatever you want with it. I'm gonna probably set this down to 0.1, maybe a little bit higher, 0.2. That should be good. Usually you don't want to use too much dispersion because it can hurt your eyes a little bit. Or it feels like it hurts your eyes. I don't know what it actually does. Some people actually think it's like the 3D, but it's not. It's just dispersing the colors. Okay, and if we zoom out on this image, you'll notice that you'll start getting this funny coloring on the edges. And just to fix that, click Fit. Okay, fantastic. Let's go ahead and get in a vignette now. So we'll bring in a ellipse mask. And if we just connect that up, look at that. So holding down Control-Shift and then clicking on a node will center your viewer or connect your viewer to that node. So if we just plug that in, we can get an idea of where our circle or our mask is hiding. So if we just select pretty much the entire icosphere, and then holding down Control and then dragging will give you this knife tool, and you can just cut wires as you please. So that's good. That's fun. Let's bring in a blur. Set it to fast Gaussian. And check relative. Let's just bump this up a bit. Your Y, let's see, your X is probably going to be a little bit more than your Y just because the dimensions along the Y are smaller than along the X. So, but it doesn't really matter. And then all we have to do is multiply that together. So bring in a mix node. Select those two, hit F, and it'll create a new wire. And then, there we go. And of course, because it's a mix node and the factor is at 1, all we see is our mask, which isn't what we want. We want to set it to multiply, and voila. And of course, we can just turn it down if there's too much. So there's without any. There's a little bit of a vignette, a little more. Some, I don't know, something like that. We're almost done. And finally, let's bring in a color balance. And this will just allow us to play with the colors and make it look pretty. So if we just bump this, I don't know, kind of yellowy. One more yellow. More yellow. I don't know. Just have fun. No rules. Oh, and if you want to mess around with the with our vignette a little bit more, we can bump the edge colors here. So if I bring in a color ramp, just drop it in there, and it'll probably connect everything up properly. Say we want to lighten up this black area. With this black draggy thing, this black handle, we can just bump the color. And now our black is this gray. So we can just adjust that to however we want. You could use this to invert things. So voila, boom, fun stuff. But yeah, just for fun. I'm gonna pull this back a little bit more. I want to start seeing a little bit more of that vignette effect. It's a little too light. No, that's a little too much. There we go. I don't know, something like that. Just have fun with it. So this is pretty well ready for your final render. Just make sure to turn off preview and go for it. I hope you have enjoyed this tutorial. If you want to see more in the future, please subscribe to BlenderWiz if you haven't already. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please like it and feel free to watch more tutorials while you're at it. If you have any recommendations or suggestions for future tutorials, feel free to leave some feedback in the comments section. Thank you for